everyone, and welcome to another episode of Page Turners Plus. As promised the last time you see us, today we'll be reflecting on Maryse Condé's Waiting for the Water to Rise. But before we get into that, I wish to let you know that you'll be seeing a new face today, Mrs. Andrea Bowman, who's one of our super fans, who's graciously accepted our invitation to join us for this reflection. To tell you a bit more about the novel and Maryse Condé, we have Paula. Paula?
Thank you, Roger. Maryse Condé was a Guadeloupean author. In 2018, she won the New Academy Prize in Literature, an alternative to the Nobel Prize, which was not awarded that year. She died on 2nd April 2024, and we're doing this program to honor her memory and her work. Set in Mali, an unnamed country bordering Mali, Guadeloupe, and Haiti, her novel Waiting for the Waters to Rise was first published in French in 2010. The Richard Philcox English language translation was published in 2021. The novel traces the life of Babacar, a doctor born in Mali to a Malian father and a Guadeloupean mother. This is an intensely political novel, told through the lens of an apolitical protagonist. Babacar is apolitical by upbringing and natural inclination, but he's often inundated by the outer bands of political squalls. The novel is particularly concerned with the nature of xenophobia. It appears to conclude that xenophobia springs from notions of pride in heritage, particularly when expressed as veneration of ancestry, religious convictions, and national affiliation. It suggests that the only people who truly benefit from notions of superior ancestry, religion, and nationality are political elites who callously manipulate those ideas for their own advancement.
Thank you, Paula. So I guess we could start with the opening pages of the book. One of the reviews quoted in the opening pages of the book describes the novel as, quote, traversed by the destinies of three people, three men linked by an unbeatable friendship who struggle to break free of their past, end quote. Do you agree with that description?
I don't, because I thought it was Babacar's story. I didn't see enough of Faoud and Movar to think that it was essentially their story. I thought it was a very strange introduction.
I agree there, and I mean even before I agree definitely that it was Babakar's story, and although and I don't want to reveal too much, although Renette wasn't physically present for much of the novel, I thought that her story, her her background, her the way she lived, dominated the story to the extent that Movar and Fouad or Faoud didn't didn't necessarily dominate the novel to my view. So I didn't see it as a story of three people, three men linked by an unbeatable friendship, and also wouldn't call it a friendship either.
I think that description misrepresents the complexity of the relationships between the men and the complexity of the story. It's a very complex story, and there are very complex stories in this story. So, probably if the word complex had been inserted somewhere in that description, but no, it is a misrepresentation, I really do think, of what the story really is about.
But I tell you what, while I agree with what you all are saying, for me, I found Faoud's, and I don't know if it has anything to do with Palestine, but and in the current climate, and just because that piqued my interest. But I found whatever nuggets, and there were more than nuggets of his story. I found them to be very the narrative compelling. His story was gripping, and I liked Faoud.
I don't know that it's a total misrepresentation actually. For similar reasons to what Tony's kind of suggested, that their lives are intricately linked. And while Babacar's clearly the center of the story, it's through his friendships with both Mavar and Fouad that he will discover happiness in the life of his daughter, but also discover home in the place of Haiti. So I actually think I can understand that representation. It's not entirely. I can see why you have issues with it, but I do think there's an element of truth that his friendships really shape his whole life, and his journey from being a very solitary character at the beginning to someone really anchored in a community and a place and time.
But then, to the extent, though, that would you say that their friendship was the whole, I don't know, reason for the novel, the story? I didn't think it dominated to the point where we could definitely say that this story was about these three men and their friendship. It's almost like they were on the periphery, in my view.
No, I don't think they were on the periphery, Roger. I don't agree with that. I think they were very central. There were other characters, of course, which were not the three men. But I think they were their relationship, whether you call it friendship or not, I think that was very central to the novel. And the novel's trajectory, to me anyway, really, although it may not have delivered at the end, but I was very, very curious to see what was the end game of that relationship. So it kept me focused on the relationship of the three men.
So am I the only one who thought that this novel was more about the politics than about the relationships? I thought it was more about the big national politics.
There was that too, as Andrew said.
But I thought it was more
stories in this novel.
Yeah, I agree. Paula, I think it was more about that, but she used the relationship of the three men to bring out those political things, right? And I also agree that I felt it was really more of Babakar's story than the other two. We didn't learn that much about Movar. His story was quite short, and he was in and out. But I do think it was Babakar's story. But I will also agree with Tony and Kesua that there was definitely a friendship between the three men. There was definitely a connection. There was community.
I'm not quarreling with that. There was definitely a friendship and as you say, community, but I just don't think it was the focus of the novel.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the focus of the novel was all the political parts of it. That was, I mean, that was the story she was trying to tell.
I also think she, as Francine just said, uses the friendship as a vehicle, but to such an extent that the friendship. I mean, I'd agree. It's not a novel about friendship, and that I definitely go. That's don't pick it up thinking this is about an exploration of the nature of friendship. That's not this novel. But I do think what she does is explain how these three men in these three different places, or from these three different places, so to speak, are bound by the similarities of their stories. And that shapes them, and that creates friendships that mean that that traverse the world, right? Friendship brings Babakar from a failed friendship in lots of ways. His wife Babakar leaves Mali in the first place, right? He ends up in the Caribbean looking for his roots or a semblance of home where he hasn't had one previously. And there he comes across this Haitian man who he ends up not initially befriending, and initially he's a doctor to a person in need, but that evolves and later it becomes a friendship through whom he will have a mother for his child, a mother for his child. And in that move to Haiti, we'll discover another person who will similarly have interest in literature together, right? They'll share long conversations. They'll have a real friendship. And that's going to be the thing that anchors him to Haiti. And he's only willing to let that go right at the very end when he thinks his actual commitment to Haiti is even bigger than his commitment to Fuad, who will then say to him, no, we're doing this together. Right? So I do think friendship is very much the heartbeat in lots of ways. It's delicately done, it's subtle, but it's there.
But then I must ask Kesua, why does Babakar have an abiding sense of alienation? Because you mentioned his travels across continents, across the Caribbean, but there still seems to be a bit of alienation where he's concerned.
But that's because he's orphaned young. He loses his family and his primary caregivers really, really young. And so he's forced to kind of figure out life on his own very early. And so journeys through, and it's not till he meets Hassan, who he's able to kind of recreate a sense of home with, that he's able to kind of, but then his friendship with Hassan is very uneven. right? And it's more of a romantic relationship on one that's unrequited, and what's the word, unconsummated. So I think that explains his sense of alienation. But also he comes from this great line. He's got this big history behind him, that in the present he doesn't benefit from in any way, shape, or form, and in fact struggles for much of his life with bitterness and disappointment due to political things that are beyond him. So I think that explains for me his alienation. It's that early orphaning, and he doesn't have an extended family to pick him up either. Like he's really just on his own and making his way through life.
But then
But wasn't his
Tekla,
his mother's own sense of alienation, his mother who nurtured him and nurtured him forever, wasn't that a big reason for his own sense of alienation? And to me, he also chose alienation, you know? That's the sense that I tended to get from him.
I agree with you entirely, Andrea. Tekla almost had alienation as something to be proud of. Tekla was certainly not committed to any sense of nationality, not committed to any sense of any kind of overarching philosophical convictions. She thought all of these things were probably problematic. She thought they were potentially dangerous, and she thought they were probably even frivolous on some level.
But she was disappointed by politics, and so became really bitter. And then, at the point when we meet her, she's this kind of angry ghost. Not to give too much away.
I didn't see any evidence of disappointment in politics. I think she just was apolitical, and she taught her son to be apolitical.
Yes.
And then for some strange reason, every country or every territory that Babakar visited and stayed, he befriended, and I'm putting this as respectful as possible, he befriended foreigners in that country. For example, Hugo Moreno, who was Colombian. Then there's Fuad. And even when he was in Mali and the whole war that was going on there, he was straddling the lines of whether he was a northerner or southerner. And he felt, well, I'm not from here, so you can't class me as either, and I should be respected because of that. Mm-hmm. So I think he battled genuinely with his
belonging,
his belonging and his perpetual sense of thinking that he's a foreigner regardless of where he went. So that was definitely part of his alienation. But we spoke about
but he wasn't in Mali. He was in Mali when he moved to be with Hassan. He was in an unnamed country which bordered Mali. I think it was Côte d'Ivoire, but it was never named.
I agree there. And I also researched Hibernia, and I was taking along that line. But seemingly it doesn't exist in modern times. The city of Hibernia.
Yeah. But I think it was Côte d'Ivoire because of the North-South conflict, and because the kind of removal of the citizenship from Northerners. Yeah. So I think that's the closest fit. At one point, I was playing with the idea that it may have been Burkina Faso, but that didn't play out because and also, well, the turmoil. That's why I thought so. But then, during one of the conflicts, when they were targeting foreigners, people from Burkina Faso were fleeing. So it couldn't have been that. So I think it was probably Côte d'Ivoire.
And then Maryse Condé had no difficulty with naming places throughout the novel in Haiti.
Right.
So why do you think she didn't name this particular country?
I have no clue. I wanted to hear from the rest of you.
I think it's because she wants it to be a kind of a symbolic place, right? It's not supposed to be a particular place. It's a standard any place where there's a civil war, where people's lives are disrupted, where there's refugees, where there's suffering. Because it's this idea of this universal suffering that she's trying to recreate. So she doesn't want to name it's that country and make it a that country problem and shame that country, perhaps. She wants it to be this is like on the continent.
I want to challenge you there, Kesua. What she described in Haiti was virtually a civil war. She was naming places. I learned so many towns and so on in Haiti through this novel. So why the the disparity? Why bash
I don't know.
Haiti and
Maybe
not Cote d'Ivoire?
I don't know. Maybe she felt like she knows Haiti better, so she could better speak to it, but she couldn't like specific. I don't know. I'm
But she
literally
lived in
just
West
throwing that
Africa
out.
for a long
Yeah,
time.
because I was
So
also thinking while reading it that she has obviously she lived in Africa to be able to write these books. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we will probably never know.
No, I think that relates to what Paula was saying initially about her broader political perspective. She is using it symbolically. She's not naming a particular country because she wants to say this is the political reality there. So she is using it, I think, to be representative of a particular thrust, a particular political scenario. So it's just supposed to relate to as many
Right.
as possible. That goes
Yeah,
with a political perspective, I'm thinking.
because we all thought of different countries it could be.
Precisely, that it could be.
Yeah.
Could have been
Yeah,
the Congo, could have been Nigeria, could have been Sierra
Right.
Leone.
exactly.
Nigeria came to mind and then she mentioned
no, but it was
Nigeria.
French. They had French
Right,
colonies.
it was French
So
colon.
it
Right,
couldn't
it
have
was French.
been
It couldn't have been
Yeah,
Nigeria.
couldn't have been
Right.
Nigeria. Had to be one of the people
Yeah.
who had a French colonizer.
So we've been speaking about the politics. So are the criticisms the novel levels against post-independence politics well founded? Everyone
There's
is
a
smiling.
wretchedness. There's a wretchedness. I've been kind of dying to say this. My first reaction is like about just a couple of pages into the novel. I get a wretchedness that goes throughout. When I say wretchedness, I'm talking about the lives of the individuals who are brought to center stage. And yes, the politics. I remember thinking that this novel could just go alongside Franz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. These are the people Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. There's a wretchedness in this novel, I find. And I actually counted how many times she used that word. She didn't use it more than about 5 times, but it reeks of that, I find. You know?
Wretched of the Earth for sure, and I'm glad you brought that up. But I mean, don't want to go down that road. But there you go, Andrea. When you talked about these people's lives, right? The first question was about whether it was about these three men. So I found Faoud's, and again, maybe because of what's currently going on in Palestine, right? I found that the fact that he didn't even want to be identified as
As
Palestinian,
Palestinian. Mhm.
right? And so he was Lebanese. I think he branded himself. I can't remember. Whatever it was, he took on a different identity. But what I found that was all to do with the politics that you all are talking about that runs throughout the novel, and that is why, to me, his story was just as relevant or almost as relevant as what's the central character's name again? I can't
Babacar.
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 Babacar, right? Babacar. They all seem, and I like the word, they all seem to have had wretched experiences, wretched lives. That's the sense that I got as well.
Mhm.
Just to say, Tony, I don't think he denied his Palestinianness. His
No, he didn't
stepfather, who's
deny it.
Lebanese,
He didn't deny
is
it.
the
He
person
just
that
could
sent him to
not
the Caribbean.
identify as it because of the backlash, because of what.
No, I don't think that's what's happening at all. I actually think Maryse Condé is doing something relatively interesting with this character. I think it's a commentary about how Caribbean people understand race, and he's a random white person. He's Lebanese because he's got a Lebanese name, because he's got a Lebanese passport, presumably, right? And so people are not, as far as people, as far as everyone around him understands that he's the white guy from Lebanon, and that's it. There's no kind of complexity to who he might be. And so he's the one who reveals very freely, no one has to get it out of him, that he's Palestinian.
I like the
And he
name of
speaks
his
very
restaurant. I
strongly
have to
about his
say,
Palestinian
Cedars in
identity.
Lebanon. I really,
And
I thought that
he's
was,
also quick to talk
yeah.
about, he's haunted by his Palestinian brother who's entered the struggle that he's kind of avoided.
Mhm.
And he wants to help. He meets other, and Babacar's like, where did he find another Palestinian? Because he finds like the only Palestinian restaurant in Haiti.
Right.
He finds another
Right.
Palestinian, and so I don't think he's at all ashamed of being Palestinian. His Palestinianness has been denied by people who don't understand that situation or his own personal story that he's
No,
not actually.
I didn't think he was ashamed.
No, there's also a really important thing. He lived in Lebanon as a child because his mother married a Lebanese man. So he spent his formative years in Lebanon. But he certainly doesn't deny his Palestinian heritage at all. He claims his Palestinian heritage. He does mention that when you tell people that you're Palestinian, it people are uncomfortable. It makes people uncomfortable.
That is the point. That's the point. So I didn't think that he was denying it or ashamed of it or whatever. It was just expedient for him not to identify. That's the point that Paula just.
Although it speaks to who he was mingling with that were embarrassed about that would find that uncomfortable, right? I can't imagine your average Joe Caribbean person that he comes across be like, "Oh, Palestinian, that's a bit awkward." But if you're mingling with the UN security forces, then they might find it awkward, right?
But remember Kuka, his obsession with Kuka. And well, it wasn't the fact that he was Palestinian, that it was the fact that he was Arab. She said Arabs are all terrorists. And I've heard those kinds of comments in the Caribbean. So.
And this was definitely post 9/11 as well. So the sentiment would have been blowing up crazy at that time. So Babacar discovered that Imagine, presumably the song by John Lennon, was one of Jaira's favorite songs. Is there anything about the novel that reminds you of that song?
I thought Imagine was a template for this novel. I think this novel is basically the message behind this novel is the exact same message in that John Lennon was selling in that song. We have to free ourselves from ideas of nationality, of religion, because those are the forces that create conflict between human beings. I don't know that I agree with that. I believe that human beings will always have conflicts just because we are human.
Yeah, one thing that did make me think of it was, I don't know if you guys remember when Tekla appeared to him and was making fun of Babakar being friends with Fawood and Movar, and she was like, "You guys need to, get together and form your a commune, and you'll be, where you'll be free from colonization and everything." And I think that was definitely in the spirit of the whole Imagine thing.
No, but you have to remember too that Tekla was making fun of them when she was
Yeah,
saying that.
absolutely.
She was saying, "Oh yeah, you're all three men from three oppressed communities. You're going to
Right.
you can go ahead and create your
Your own community. Yeah.
your wonderful community that has no oppression."
Right.
You think Tekla is the authorial voice?
I think so. I thought so. I don't know.
I also wondered if she is Maryse Condé.
Well, yes, that's what I'm saying.
I
Right.
thought
sorry.
she was.
I thought you meant like when
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was.
I thought so.
Yeah,
Because
I
she has.
definitely wondered that. I was like, is Tekla Maryse Condé? I did wonder that. Yeah.
She's pessimistic enough to be her.
With or without the blue eyes?
I was just about
Well,
to ask that.
the blue eyes, I mean, she couldn't make it obvious that it was her, so she had to throw in
But
something.
the blue eyes might have been a metaphor for some sort of ostracization, something. So how do you respond to the corn blue eyes in black faces?
I
It was
think
mean,
it's indicative of trauma. I mean, okay, we know that there are black people with blue eyes, fine. But in this particular context, I think she used the blue eyes, and particularly how the Manils got blue eyes, the trauma that the family went through to get the blue eyes, as representative of colonization, conquest, and the blue eyes that shape and frame the way the colonized look out on the world. So why I'm bringing it back here is because if our author is Tekla, does our author also have those blue eyes? Is she looking out at the world, from a black face with blue eyes? That question, I think, arises.
She does
But
have a white translator.
She
yeah,
she does
Who
have
is
a
her husband? Who
With
is
her
her
husband.
husband? But
yeah.
I don't think that Maryse Condé is particularly colonized. No
I
more than the
agree.
rest of
I
us. No
don't.
more than the rest of us
Well,
who are, yeah.
yeah, I was going to say
Um,
that, Paula, because as much as we think that we are not looking through those blue eyes, as Andrea says, a lot of times we are unconsciously doing it, because we've all been
Our language,
colonized, man.
our language alone.
Just that alone,
precisely,
you know,
precisely. Yeah.
modes of
Um,
dress. I mean, we've been so programmed in that way over the
and I
generations.
also think the more educated you are, the more colonized you are. You have to be.
Because because your education is based on you
What
start
Ketsu was
with a
faced.
colonial education. That's the first
Yep.
thing.
That's so hard to
I
accept,
think
yeah?
Kesso, I
But,
think
but then
Kesso
it's
was having,
probably
having a
true.
hard time with this. I want to hear from Kesso. I see her having a hard time
Yeah,
with that
guess
idea.
what?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to strong disagree on that one. Strong disagree. Now I can appreciate that when you've got foreigners who shape your education system and make it in their image, that we can feel like the more educated we are, the more colonization exposure we have, right? And that it's very it's very easy to assimilate to colonize a culture. Willing to accept that, and we see that a lot in the 19th and 20th century in both Africa and the Caribbean, but also in Asia. But I think in this year 2024, there are also alternative. I'm trying not to use that word that we love to say in academia, epistemologies. Right, there's different ways of learning. Right, like there's not only the colonizers who educate, and we have lots of examples of our own intellectual traditions that we can be very, very invested in and educated
Mhm,
within, and therefore not therefore to be educated is to be colonized.
mhm.
So yes, I'm happy to accept that lots of the kind of parts of the world that we come from as Black people have education systems that have not been revolutionized post independence, shall we say? Right? Happy to accept that, and there's work to be done. Absolutely. But I don't think I don't. No, I don't agree that the more educated you are, the more colonized you are. Because the more educated you are, often is the more you think for yourself, right?
Yes.
But it depends on
Um,
where that more education happens,
well, that's
right?
exactly what I mean,
Because
though. In what ways
like
are we
you
being
said, now
educated?
in 2024, okay, yes, people have lots of more opportunities, and so we can break away from all those traditional things. But quite frankly, I do feel still a lot of the people in the Caribbean stick with our traditional educational systems, even trying to suggest a break away from things like the common entrance, and people are up in uproar. Don't see that we've had that
I'll raise you
change
one.
yet.
I'll raise you one. The data is very clear, that children learn better in their national languages. When
Right.
we suggest that you teach children in Creole, the whole community explodes. That is an outrageous suggestion. So they prefer for the picnic them to hear English that they don't understand and don't learn well in than to be taught in their own language.
So
Crazy.
you handicap them from the word go. That's the point. But it's a
And you
concept
teach
because
them to be ashamed of their own language,
right.
which is
But
also
but then
crazy.
the excuse for that is that English is the universal language, and it's a
And
tool.
but
No, but
It's a
if
they
tool
can
to
listen,
learn it.
listen,
acquire.
But
It's
they
the
can
same in the French
learn it.
system.
Listen,
And it's the same in Haiti. In
Yeah,
but
but
Haiti, where
they
99.9% of the population speak only Creole.
Creole.
yeah.
no, but
But
the
These
I'm
people
fact
don't
is,
get
the
speaking
people
Creole.
who
So
are advocating teaching in Creole are not advocating don't teach English. They're advocating teach English as a second language, and
Right.
the children will learn it better.
I accept that. I agree with that. I mean, it's not
Oh,
been tested, but I somehow feels right. It
It,
feels right.
no, it's been tested. It's been tested in Jamaica, and it
Okay.
worked.
But on the
Not
theme
only
of
Jamaica, you have private schools in Martinique, for example, since the
Yes,
70s.
yes. No,
They've
I know
educated
that
their
because
students
my
in
daughter
Creole
taught at a
instead of
private
French.
school in Martinique, and and she actually went to the classes where they taught Creole because she only knows French. So she went to
Right.
those classes to learn Creole.
Roger,
No, no, I'm
before you
talking
move
about
on,
schools where
right?
all of the teaching takes place in Creole, right? There's no French, like the Creole is the language of instruction, and those are political choices that people make in order to, like you say, improve educational outcomes for children. But
Before
I
you,
also want to be clear that like children are, in the nicest possible way, the basics level of education. They're not the top, right? That's the first level. So when we say the more educated are, the more colonized you are, that's where I disagree, because actually, as you continue through your education, if you go right through to the end of
We're
what we call
forgetting the
education,
novel. We need to
we
get
are.
Yes,
back to
we
the
are.
novel.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
are
So,
we?
I
Or
want
are
to
we?
get back to something you said, Paula, about Tekla and you and Andrew making her Maryse Condé. But you and then you quite jokingly said that you believe so because Tekla is a pessimist, and by inference you're saying Maryse Condé is a pessimist. But do you think that Tekla is really a pessimist or a cynic? And I found her more cynical.
But are to be cynical, don't you have to be a pessimist? Can you be one without?
Cynics are disappointed
Can
romantics.
you be cynical without being pessimistic? I think we're talking all philosophy. This we're not discussing the novel, which is
Okay.
probably a good thing. Which is probably
I think you can. I don't think you have to be. I don't think you have to be pessimistic to be cynical. You can be hopeful for the future while cynical about somebody's motives or a
Yeah,
particular
yeah,
success
because
of an adventure that's coming up.
you've seen so many things. Cynicism is brought about by experience.
But
Exactly.
also,
Yeah.
The
I will
realism
say
outside.
the other reason. Oh, sorry, Andrea.
No. Sorry, it's just one little comment I was, just saying. I find her very realistic, and the reality is not beautiful. You
Yeah.
know.
no. I don't fight with Maryse Condé about being realistic. I agree. For in every novel I've ever read, and I've read a lot of her novels and her nonfiction as well. She is absolutely realistic. She has no romantic notions,
Good.
and I appreciate that.
Mhm.
But I have some quarrels with her philosophical positions. Many quarrels with her philosophical.
I also want to add to Tony, one of the reasons why I thought Maryse Condé is the voice of the mother is because she had that similar life. She also never felt comfortable at home and spent most of her life away from home. And we know when she tried to go back to Guadeloupe later in life, she couldn't hack it and was like, nah, this isn't for me. Like I love home, but I can't live here. So she obviously lived with a long sense of alienation. Although she also pops up in the character of Raynette, right? Because she
Yes.
was the person that was in the relationship with Jean Dominique, that
Right.
character that she characterizes as Leo.
Mhm.
So I think, and also the choice of the name Renette is really interesting because in Guadeloupe, Renette is the name of an activist that was very well known in the 1980s, a big political activist who was involved in independence campaigning. And I think if I remember correctly, I'm going to get my history wrong. He was very much into kind of, I want to say it nicely, direct action, should we call it?
Okay.
So that she chooses that name, and I think the way she chooses names in the novel is really interesting. There are lots of like references that are quite direct, and some of them that are less direct to real things. And so when you talk about realism, I think she's definitely invested in the novel with lots of things that are easily kind of picked upable or researchable, if you like, and ways of learning by the names that she chooses.
Another indication, perhaps, that she is Tekla is the fact that Tekla is a frustrated writer.
Yes.
She probably puts it in that Tekla is not successful to kind of distance Tekla from herself, but she couldn't help it. She just had to make Tekla a writer.
Do you think she also might have been saying in another world she could have been? So like if she'd been unsuccessful, then this is how she would have been. Do you know what I mean? Like they share a
Maybe
position, and she was fortunate to have the career that she had, but she could also have been that other person.
That's a very real possibility. I want to shift to another of Maryse Condé's work. So, for those of you who have read Segu, did the fact that the protagonist was a Traore descendant have any impact on how you received this story?
Well, it excited me. We find out very early in the novel, and I got really really excited about that. It didn't focus very much on the fact that he was descended from this family, but it certainly made it exciting.
Yeah, I agree. When that happened, I was like, "Oh yes, the Traore Segu," and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." I thought it was very cool that she did that. Maybe, yeah, it was just fun. But it didn't like it didn't set me up for anything. Like I didn't have like any expectations or anything. I just thought it was nice to know that he was descended from the characters in Segu.
Is it something about the world that they create as well? She's kind of modernizing that story because we leave Segu in the like mid 19th century, right? And now we're back in the early 20th. I found it really hard to place the timing of the novel. It felt like it was kind of mid 20th century, but it was very vague, which I thought was interesting given how much specificity there is in the novel. But it felt like it was updated. I got really like similarly. I was like, "Oh, we're back in Segu. I love Segu." But similarly, it didn't. There was nothing that drew you back to that story other than that it had happened, I guess, rather than anything in that shaping anything in the present, except the problems of the country that he's in now. Like this is what's happened to Segu 150 years later. Like this is where we are now. Remember the greatness of Segu. What went wrong? It's kind of I thought she was dealing with that.
Yeah, I agree there, Kesso, in terms of other than when she explicitly gave dates, the novel it felt like it could have been the 20th century, then it was the 21st century. It also felt like it could have been the 19th century. So I agree there.
Nah,
On
nah.
that
She
point.
gave very specific dates. She told us 2010. In 2010, Fuad, I don't know how to say his name. He arrived in Haiti, and we know that yes, it said that in so
No,
many words that
2000.
he
He arrived
right.
in 2000.
2000.
2000.
2000. Sorry, right. Sorry, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Was the
He
earthquake?
yes, he arrived in Haiti in 2000, and then we know that dues is 2010.
Mhm.
So I don't know why you had trouble with the dates because
Yeah,
I
I
didn't.
didn't really have trouble. I mean, there were a lot of references. I mean, and she was talking about cell phones and iPads and all these sorts of things as well. And so I felt it was easy to kind of figure out like when things were happening. She made reference to 9/11 and yeah, the tsunami and all these different. She made reference to so many things, in fact, all these different disasters around the world. So I think it was fairly easy to situate yourself. I think it was basically late 20th century, early 21st century, basically.
I actually wanted to pick back up on the fact that Babakar was a Troy descendant because several individuals in this novel were descendants of royalty. Even though one was assumed or imagined, the Christoph Henry II, that was an assumed uh, persona, but it was also, was it Hassan, who was also the descendant of royalty? And then I wondered why she used those characters to mingle with very common people. So, for example, Renette, Movar. Um, did anybody else have any thoughts on that? Oh, that's just me.
I thought it was like a fall from grace thing, right? That this kind of these royal lineages did very little in the harsh realities of the contemporary world. That was I thought what she was doing with it. Like for all we know really early on that Babakar is the descendant of this like glorious African empire, right? But look at how we meet him. He's just another orphan kid trying to make it through the world. Like those things don't save.
And that was my sense. But guess what you're saying there is also the wider sense of that is our own situation in terms of maybe we're all descendants from royalty. But look at where we are today, right? So we've been colonized, all that has been stripped from us, and it's almost meaningless in terms of how it impacts our lives, right? So
I'm
there might
just
have been a wider meaning there.
I was laughing at Paula's reaction, Tony, not at you. I just want to clarify because
I
I
didn't
can
even
see
see
that
you laugh,
Paula
Francie.
No,
Paula
no,
does not
no, no.
Paula
My
does
my
not believe
reaction,
in the
my reaction.
whole we are descended from kings theory that some people think
Well, I
about.
don't know. I mean,
We We definitely weren't. We probably were also slaves in Africa. That's probably why. That's probably why we were sent over. It was just easy to catch us. Um,
I haven't got a clue. I don't know. There's been a big void left by our colonizers in terms of linking us back to where our roots are. So Paula, I don't know.
I always like to ask the question: is this a feminist novel? Right, when we have a women writer, and sometimes when we don't. And I found it really disorienting to have this like proud black woman writer who's clearly a very committed, like unapologetically black Caribbean African Pan African writer be such a rubbish feminist, right? And I was just like, did anybody else feel that way? Is it just me? Like, because four of the stories that she tells in detail, three of them are the men. The only story we hear in detail is Estrella's story, right? Estrella's story. There are all these women who are constantly marginal whilst being central to the lives of the men, but she never lets them have a voice, really. Jahira, Miriam, Raynette. We never know Raynette's story from her point of view. What did Raynette want? What did she feel? We're guessing constantly. We only ever see her through Babacar's perspective, through her sister's perspective. We never meet the women. Tonine, central to the story. Never hear a word from her. Never, like, until she's had this one weird witchy line. Is she going to take the daughter? Like, it's to center these men in the way that she does, to have this story about three men. What does it tell us about her? Is she just a Pan-Africanist but not a feminist? Is it a generational thing? What's going on?
Kesawa, you and I are always fighting. We're going to continue to fight. Maryse Condé wrote how many novels? About 12? She had women characters who were central in several of them. She had male characters who were central in several of them. One of the reasons you and I fight is because you're always telling, I shouldn't say always, but you're often wanting to tell writers what they should write. Write your own book. Don't tell writers what they must write. Leave the woman alone.
I have to say that I quite liked that she told the story from the point of view of the men. I thought it was interesting that as a female writer and a feminist and a powerhouse, that she decided she wanted to write a story about the lives of three men who met up and show that, yeah, maybe show that men have thoughts and feelings and have friendships too.
Why is Mova sacrifice? Why is this man the sacrifice in this novel? He's a beautiful character, really beautiful, almost pure, but he is sacrifice. Don't you think so? And why is this?
I love that question, Andrea. And I asked a similar one, like, because it's not just him, both of his sisters as well. The only survivors in this novel are the foreign born or non Haitians. So I think, what is she telling us with that? What is that about? Mova's death is horrific. And we're lucky that it's noted as the impression that you get, right? That it's almost, no one else is going to note it. I think it's a wonderful question. And what does, I'd like to hear anyone else's thoughts on that one.
Bad things happen to good people.
Anais survives, and Anais, not only does she survive, she is this symbol of hope. So I don't know that she is saying, I don't know that Maryse Condé is saying that Haiti is doomed. Everybody Haitian is doomed.
Doesn't it go back to what we were saying about her being a realist and unromantic in a way?
But I don't think Movar had to die. He could have been convinced not to spend $10,000 on a whatever. He could have been like, and he didn't have to die when he got there. Someone could have said,
die at the hands of his uncle. His uncle. It's really.
But that's very Maryse Condé,
right? I mean that is the feeling.
Dying at the hands of the people who are supposed to love you.
Right.
That's Maryse Condé.
She didn't hold anything back. She doesn't romanticize anything. She's like, this is how people are.
This is what happens. Yeah.
This is what happens.
That's the reality.
That's the reality. That's basically the feeling. I mean, the way she described pretty much everything was described in such a matter of fact way. I think some people would probably be shocked reading the book and the way that she describes stuff because she just says it,
But
man, and
but
it's
you
just
see
But
that
the one
cruel
thing she
reality.
uses,
That cruel reality is embellishing the fact of what and like what Andrew is saying is that Boba was seemingly so pure. So and Raul, this is good things, bad things
bad
happen to
things
good
happen.
people, right? So it's almost like life is cruel,
Mhm.
you
I
know.
also think
But that was
she's not good
repeated.
at
Even
saying,
Baba Kara repeated that several times in the novel. You know that bad things will happen. That
Mhm.
when he said once, no matter it just something happened, and he said it just proves that no matter where you go, death will eventually find you. And
yeah.
there are several things like that that he said throughout the novel. And I guess that actually she was foreshadowing for us. We should have expected something terrible to happen to to Movar, just because you know
Mm.
life's a
But
bitch and then you die.
Paula said it's not a
But
doomsday story,
but she
but
does
I
also, in her relentless pursuit of realism, miss out. And I was looking for it in the novel. Any kind of depiction of the beauty of Haiti as a country. Haiti is a stunningly. For those of us from the Caribbean who are accustomed to beautiful places and landscapes, Haiti tops them all. It's stunningly, breathtakingly beautiful, and there was none of that in the novel. There's a whole other
Myth,
world beyond that cruel
Beautiful.
realism.
That was very
Mythic.
Miriam
beautiful. Very
Chauncey,
beautiful.
Miriam Chauncey, in she wrote a Facebook post after to to honor Maryse Condé after she died, and she spoke um, about Maryse Condé having a difficult or a complex relationship with Haiti,
Mm.
which probably bordered on the difficult. But I can see Maryse Condé having a complex relationship with everything and everyone that borders on the difficult. I think that was her character.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. But I want to thank Andrea for joining us today. You made this discussion even richer. It was a lovely discussion. We have lots more to discuss, but we're out of time. I want to thank our viewers for joining us. The next time you see us, we'll be doing a recap of all our favorite books of 2023 and 2024, books that we didn't even review on this program, but we'll tell you all about our personal favorites. Thank you for joining us and have a lovely day.